having children was one of the things that makes you kind of realize, well, there's more to life than just chasing dollars. And unless we end up getting the renewable energy piece right, the carbon piece right, there won't be there won't be a planet. So, sorry, that's completely wrong. There will be a planet. The planet will be completely fine. It's just us who won't be on it.
I think there's nothing wrong with making money, even when it comes to like education or health, as long as you're not butchers. You're not butchering the common man. I don't think there's any problem with making money. And I think, yes, renewable energy is a huge potential opportunity for everyone.
The energy transition can be a great equalizer in the world. If Pakistan does change its energy system to renewables, it becomes self-sufficient for energy. It no longer needs to worry about importing fossil fuels from neighboring countries.
In Pakistan, it's essentially where we don't have a lot of investment available when it comes to the banks, because the lending situation is pretty bad, because there's a high rate of defaults. We don't have a very digitalized economy system, so it's pretty hard to sort of track who took the money and all of that. 1/3 of the country was underwater in July and August. So I don't know how many times we're going to be asking for aid. I think on every year we'll be asking for aid, because there's no way that we have the capacity or the capability or the efficiency to essentially tackle all of this problem.
But I don't even think that framing it as aid is correct. Like it's reparations. It's money. It's money that's your due. That's your owed. And the international community has committed to making this money available. So it's not it's not aid. It's your money, and so it should be approached in that way. It's not like you're not asking for a handout. You're demanding what's owed to you. It's entirely different. Yeah, and also just one more thing. I read in I think it was in Bloomberg recently, that just speaking of Karachi, that unless things turn around, if things keep on going on the path that they're going, with emissions, with climate, that by 2050 Karachi will be entirely underwater, and that is dry. That is stunning. That is.
But what people don't really realize is the fact that that 1.5% global temperature might mean something else to one part of the world, where it might change by 10 degrees. In some parts of the world will be 15 degrees. And that's crazy. I mean, that's like the real places where it was 40 degrees, that was the highest temperature, imagine 50. Or so, I mean, it's just going to destroy the entire, the infrastructure, the water supplies, everything. I mean, I even heard in the UK there were some parts of some runway that were melted off because of the heat wave. Welcome, Chris. Should I call you Chris or should I call you Christopher?
Chris, please, Hamza. Please.
Okay. So, Chris, welcome to my podcast and to the millions and millions of my followers. And so, how are you? And if you were to meet someone new, how would you introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you. Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to come along and speak to yourself and your followers. It's a real pleasure. And I'm doing good. Thanks for that too. And if I was to meet a new person and describe my story, my career, in kind of brief terms, because everybody's got a story and things happen and you kind of react and go along and then you try and explain it in retrospect. Story of my career, which is largely expanded in retrospect, is I always had a great interest in entrepreneurship. Always wanted to run a business, but I wasn't entirely sure how we should be doing that. So we started out in business economics as an undergraduate. So went into studying Trinity College in Dublin. At the end of that, doing business and economics, I was very thoroughly enjoyed both of those disciplines, but there's no obvious job at the end of it. Consultancy or law are the two you then go into. So I went into law. So practiced as a lawyer for a couple of years. So went across to London, did a law degree, then practiced as a lawyer, and thought, well, this is brilliant. Like, I really enjoyed the experience, the learning experience of being a lawyer. You end up getting the frames of thinking are brilliant, and the ways of analyzing situations are brilliant. Was really good set of training. But then sitting down and the actual practice of law was a little bit more restrictive. Like, what they really wanted you to do was just look at the pieces of paper and understand where the pieces of paper stack up.
All right.
Then I went into it, and then I was doing a secondment in investment banking, where I was supposed to be there for 3 months, and I went, wow, this is great, because I get to see all parts of the business, whether I care about whether the entrepreneur makes sense, whether the market makes sense, or the product makes sense, what they're doing. So you had to understand all of that. And I thought, this is great. End of my 3 months secondment, they said stay, and I stayed in there for like 11 years. That was great. But at the end of 11 years of investment banking, where you're learning quite a lot about new industries and new markets, new people, but you're not really creating or building anything. So I still hadn't scratched my entrepreneurial itch. I had a desire to build something myself. And the mere kind of chasing of money, which is all you really cared about investment banking, like, every quarter, how much money had you made, and that was your sense of self-worth. In the end of it, that became a little unfulfilling. So I took a step back, went off, did an MBA, and at the end of it, I decided, no, I wanted to get into energy. One piece of early, advice, because you mentioned before we started that you wanted to be kind of pulling in little nuggets of information for your particularly younger viewership, is a professor of mine once told me that if when you're choosing your career, make sure that you pick something that you would give your life to, because you will. Yeah. So you spend so much of your time, so much of your energy doing whatever you're doing in your day job. At the end of your life, looking back on it, that's what you've dedicated the majority of your life to. So be really careful what you pick. It is hugely important decision. So at the end of my investment banking in my MBA journey, I then came out, so I went, no, I want to start something myself, and I believe that energy and climate change, as it was named at the time now, more appropriately climate emergency, was what I decided to be putting my time and energy into. And 10, 11 years later, this is what I've been doing, and no regrets. Thoroughly enjoy doing what I'm doing. Think it's important. Think it's purposeful, and I think I'm making some small measure of impact along the way.
No, I think it's quite huge, and it's a great journey though. But I mean, from being a lawyer, going out to then doing your own business, studying MBA, I think it shows a person who's been reflecting, who's been not only just in the rat race just for the sake of it. I think it was more. It seems like it was more driven from purpose than just the monetary benefit. So my question is, how did your MBA essentially help you in eventually landing your entrepreneurship?
Yeah, no, it's very, very good question. And it's also something that you need to be thoughtful of before choosing what school you go into. So I was aware that from being a lawyer and being an investment banker, that I was good at putting bits of paper together, and I was good at doing financial models and doing that type of thing. But I didn't have the developed skill set in entrepreneurship, in marketing, and in more kind of softer skills as well, kind of leadership as well. I was leading a desk in an investment bank. It's a really different job than trying to build a business. It's because all that you need to motivate people in investment banking is money. that's why people go into that. But when you're leading a business that's more kind of socially purposed, you need to have different skills and different ways of looking at things. So I looked at a series of different business schools. Some of them like very economics based, while others being more kind of finance based. And I came back to London Business School. It was at the time rated number 1 in the world, above like Harvard and Yale and whatever, which of course was a massive draw. and it also had very strong faculty in the entrepreneurship and marketing courses. So I went in there and said, "Look, I need to be developing these things." But that was just on the pure skill level. What was probably more important was the confidence that it gave you coming out of it, because you go into a class full of brilliant people, and you sink or swim. And at the end of it, I felt actually I belong here. Like I don't know, quite how I got here. I don't really think I deserve to be here. But at the end of it, you kind of go, no, you do. Actually, you've done pretty well. You're feeling pretty happy at the end of it. So it then gives you an extra level of confidence to be able to step out and say, well, I can take the next step. I can do the next thing. And having the badge really helps. I'm grateful to London Business School for having given me that. So I stayed close to the school ever since, and it is still an important part of my life. And on the alumni council, I've been president of Alumni Energy Club. I've done lots of things to the scope, and I've gained an awful lot for it, not just during the 2 years in the program, but in the decade or so since leaving.
So so basically, like in Pakistan, there's also like a great deal of marketing behind running your own startups, but we haven't really taken off like in other parts of the country. It's still like with India or even in some parts of Bangladesh, it's still better. With you wanting to be an entrepreneur all your life, what would you say are the main things, maybe top 3 things that you would look for in an entrepreneur, or how would you encourage people to take up entrepreneurship?
There's a lot of accidental entrepreneurs, like people who didn't intend to be entrepreneurs and then suddenly find themselves in a position that they are starting a business, and most of the time that doesn't really work. Most of the time to be an entrepreneur, it has to be something within you, something that you feel like I need to be building. I want to have my own independence. I want to be able to. I don't want to be working for somebody else. I want to be able to choose how I run my days. I want to be able to take value from my own work and take the risks. Like you need to. So risk appetite, independence, and tenacity. You need to be able to take the knocks, stand up and keep on going, and flexibility. Like you can't go in with a definitive business plan for what you're going to be doing, because the first thing that'll happen is Mike Tyson had this. I'm sure you've come across the expression before, but Mike Tyson says very well. Says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it's exactly what happens. You get out into the world with this great business plan, and suddenly the world punches you in the face. And like there's other players, other competitors, the other forces in the market that force you to change and move. So you need to have that level of adaptability. When you get punched in the face, you need to be able to stand up and move on and keep on going. And you need to have a real desire to do it, because it's difficult. But if you do it, and if you do, there's nothing more satisfying than building something yourself, than being able to look back and go, look, I've achieved this, like I've built this. There's something that'll last, above and beyond me, and above and beyond our time here. If you go in and if you're working for if you're like writing code for Microsoft, or you're doing whatever else, you're a small part of a really big machine. And it might be something that it gives you security, and it gives you predictability. It gives you some intellectual challenge. It gives you a sense of purpose, and all those things are really are great things if that is how you're built. If you want those things, I'm sorry, just as I don't mean just as in as they're trying to diminish it, but if your goals are making sure you've got security, feeding your family, having some intellectual security, and some kind of privilege of being part of a big organization, wonderful. You do that, and that's great. That makes you happy, wonderful. But if you are somebody who would not be happy in that, who wants to be building something themselves, but has the resilience, has the grit, has the flexibility to be able to move, then go, please, try and do entrepreneurship. Everyone, if that's inside you, you won't be happy doing anything else. Now, I know in for example, the US, they are massively supportive of entrepreneurs. So it's almost like if you go on in, you're trying to get funding for a startup, like they say, well, how many times have you failed? If you haven't failed at least once, we're not giving you any money because you haven't learned. You haven't taken those lessons. But in the kind of UK Irish ecosystem where I was working in, it was a bit less. It was a bit less secure in that sense. That people were looking more down on failures, but you still had a very strong kind of like grant system where governments would be supporting you. You had people who would be supporting you as well. You had academic institutions around who would be kind of lending their insights into you. And you had, importantly, you have a social safety net. Like no matter what, like you're not going to starve. Even if your business is going to fall flat in your face, there's a social safety net there, so you can still kind of get on and do that. So it depends on your environment. You can go and be insulted by money in the US with a good startup idea. A bit more difficult to raise money in the UK, but it's entirely possible. I can't really comment on Pakistan, I'm afraid, but it's. I know. I can talk about the differences of the places I've been living and working, but
yeah. No, it's absolutely fine. I can give you a little bit of
please,
what Pakistan looks like. So in Pakistan, it's essentially where we don't have a lot of investment available when it comes to the banks, because the lending situation is pretty bad because there's a high rate of defaults. We don't have a very digitalized economy system, so it's pretty hard to sort of track who took the money and all of that. The other thing is that we're fond of real estate investments more than startups and other things, and since obviously the real estate industry only targets a few other industries, so there's no and the returns in real estate industries are just absolutely crazy. I mean, you could just double your money in maybe 6 months or 8 months because just everyone is doing it. But that doesn't create any entrepreneurs. That doesn't. Yeah, exactly. So that's why the entire structure of the economy doesn't really sort of promote entrepreneurships in that sense. But even then, there's always opportunity. There are always good things as well. I mean, the labor here is pretty cheap. The rents and all of that, those things are relatively cheaper. But what you lack is basically expertise in fields, which is something that we really, really lack. So I won't say it's thriving, but we're trying to make a comeback or whatever. We did get a few $1 million here and there for some startups, but it's still in infancy. I think it's in a long way to go. So tell me about your company, United Renewables. What do you do?
Yes.
What's
yeah,
that?
Okay. So I'll take you from the start. So leaving the MBA, what's as with most good MBA students, I went through about 20 different business plans, 20 different ideas of things I quite like to do, and ended up looking at single stick wind turbines in Northern Ireland as a little niche, like an underdeveloped niche, because it had really good wind resource. It had a supportive local population. And it had, on the face of it, good regulations, and behind it, support regulations, and it had some pretty decent subsidies to try and encourage the green energy market there. So that all seemed fine. Went to go and raise a couple 100,000. Ended up raising a lot more than that. Like the first kind of round was over in British pounds, got over £5 million. And so it ended up having quite a bit of pressure to go and build stuff. So it was up in Northern Ireland, and we got some options on land, and we got some new ideas of what we wanted to build. But then the plan was great until it got punched in the face, and we then realized that the reality on the ground was quite different. And that while the regulations was there, the reality was the planning officials hadn't caught up with the regulations. Like they were sitting there going, we don't like tall vertical structures in the middle of countrysides. We don't want to. So they can skyscrapers, perfectly reasonable. But Like a wind turbine is a tall vertical structure in the middle of the countryside, and it's not a skyscraper, and it's really important. So you had to eventually get them turned around on that. So we did 22 planning appeals over the space of a couple of years. And we're going into the courts and saying, no, seriously, they've said no, but the regulations say this. Then they're arguing no, the regulations say this because, and we're interpreting it this way, and we got the laws completely rewritten over the course of 22 planning appeals. So now there's a thriving renewable energy market, but that's like largely because we were being obstinate. We had the legal skills, and we had a lot of the skills you needed to be able to go in and do this. Then also talking to the grid up there. The grid was at the time very much focused on the linear approach to energy, where you've got one big energy plant pushing power to the users, and it's like a train station, but getting them to get their heads around the new energy future is going to be more like downtown Manhattan with cars coming at all sorts of junctions, power generation here, there, and everywhere, and flowing all over the place. That was a bit more difficult to get their heads around, but and eventually, after a couple of years of working with them, we did, and we had one of the key guys that we started out. I started out this journey, but was a grid expert, was an energy expert like that. So we helped them with that too. So now, thankfully, which was wonderful, that more than 50% of all electricity in Northern Ireland is generated from renewable sources. And we're very proud to have played a strong part in that. But moving on from there, that's very much kind of the wind story. We have, as we developed our expertise in renewables, we understood kind of anaerobic digestion makes a lot of sense, which is taking kind of organic waste, turning it into a natural biogas, and the biogas to create electricity. So we built a couple of anaerobic digestion plants. We involved in some hydro plants, some solar energy plants, and we've been kind of growing our expertise, our knowledge, and experience in all these different areas. And then recently we had a kind of a moment where we went, well, again, what do we want to do? Like, what is our kind of our purpose for this business? And kind of collectively, we started. The founders and the originators of this business are all from Ireland, with one exception. And coming from an island nation, like a kind of, and we've all spent quite a lot of time on island nations throughout our lives. And going back to island nations we visited as children now, and seeing the impact of climate change on them, of the climate emergency on them, seeing like the coastal erosion, seeing the devastations of hurricanes, monsoons, as you're all too familiar with. It's something that we think is really important to be trying to go and help with. So instead of, if we just wanted to make money, we'd go to the US and we take some of the Inflation Reduction Act money that's been floating around there. It's not that wouldn't really kind of, lots of people are doing that. We wouldn't think we're making a massive impact doing that. We're just adding to an already big picture. But so what we're doing now is we're going around and we're working with island nations. One of them here, the Isle of Man, which is where you're talking to you from now. We're also looking at projects in Barbados and Bahamas, the Faroe Islands, to try and help island nations decarbonize over time, and to try and help them have some sort of more. I don't want to talk in a hyperbole, but we want to try and help them. I'm not going to say transform or anything, but just want to try and help.
No, I think if they're able to get rid of their dependence on oil for power generation and all of that, which is something that with the Ukraine war, I think the entire I think Europe is facing the power situation because of the Ukraine war. If I think renewable is that way out, out of those dependencies on the fuel. So I think you are trying to sort of make them more independent of oil, and I think that's just great. So why did you I understand why you chose the renewable energy sector. What was that turning point, or that when that eureka moment where you knew that your business going to do well?
It's a good question. It is. There was no kind of eureka moment. It was a slow walk. It was slow kind of understanding that this is really important. And having children was one of the things that makes you kind of realize, well, there's more to life than just chasing dollars. And unless we end up getting the renewable energy piece right, the carbon piece right, there won't be a planet. So, sorry, that's completely wrong. There will be a planet. The planet will be completely fine. It's just us who won't be on it. The planet keeps spinning. It's it doesn't particularly care what we do, but it's whether it's fit for human life or not. And the way that we're going, like the path that we're going along, is quite rapidly going to make it unfit for humans. And having children and then looking at them and going, well, we've got a responsibility to be looking after them, looking after their futures. That was the major part of it. But I also had kind of a series of friends who studied environmental science over years, and they were. I can remember when I first started in investment banking. We were going out, and I was talking in terms of investment banking, and they were talking in terms of climate, and I was looking at them going, "Come on." But over time, their influence kind of seeped in, and your eyes open more and more and more. And I think that's why I do like do have conversations on climate, do as many conversations on climate as I can, because it isn't. You need to have continual messaging, continual conversations, continual understanding, and people will move along a path and could understand. Okay, it's real, and they'll be it's real, but it's real, but it's someone else's problem, or it's real, but there's nothing I can do about it. But the board and like I went along that path myself. I said there's nothing I can do about it, but actually there's a responsibility to do it, so I should try and do something. So it's a kind of a slow incremental change that gets you to wanting to do something about an existential crisis. But that all sounds very dramatic. But I'll also say, from the business school person inside me, that the energy transition is the greatest wealth creation opportunity of our generation, by far. Like energy has been the greatest source of wealth. So for generations, like from the Industrial Revolution, coal, and oil, Middle East, Russia, whatever, all the wealth comes from energy there. Now the energy transition into renewables is also is going to be the same thing. It is the same thing. If you need to be changing the entire way that we move, we interact, we communicate on these devices, there is enormous amounts of infrastructure and spending that needs to be done. And if you have the skills and expertise to help with that, well, then there's money to be made as well. So it isn't just you can do it because you believe that it is a cause, a noble cause that you want to do, but you can also do it because you. I talked to a couple of guys a couple of weeks ago they're like tech bros. They were there a couple of years back. They'd be writing algorithms for Google, but now they're climate because they're tech bros. They're putting their tech brains into climate, not because they're massive believers, but because they think that this is where they can be making their mark, making their money, and that's fine by me. I'm perfectly happy with that. The more skills and expertise that come in, whatever the motivations are, we need them in the space as well. So it's great. It's an open church, but it's I've slightly deviated a lot from the question there. But I think it's an important message to say that you can make money out of this as well. You can do good by doing good.
Yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with making money, even when it comes to like education or health, as long as you're not butchers. You're not butchering the common man. I don't think there's any problem with making money, and I think yes, renewable energy is a huge potential opportunity for everyone. I just don't know how the politicians and the world leaders are going to really play their role, because with the Trump administration and going back on the Paris Agreement, I still think that there's just too much oil money involved everywhere for to break off that lobby, and then moving away from, because even when I see researches on electric cars and all of that, so there are always counter researches where they say the carbon print of uh, you know um, creating those batteries, or creating all of that is also huge. And if we completely move away from oil, I don't think we will have enough lithium or whatever, or all of the resources that are needed to fuel everyone's cars, or all of the the grids and um, the different factories as well. So uh, anyway, so have you ever explored the potential for renewable energy in Pakistan, South Asia, specifically?
We have a lot to be getting on with. Like we have an awful lot of markets that we know well, we understand, and we believe that we can get into. We can make a meaningful mark on island nations, but I don't think that we are as well. We're particularly well placed to be. We can't be all things to all people. We can't go over. We can't do everything. So we're focusing in on the little bits that we can do. Maybe in a few years we might expand out and have a look at other places. But no, we haven't particularly. No, I have had some experience in working with people from South Asia, like on the MBA particularly, and we had some really good experience in of working with kind of turbine manufacturers from the region, from India, and it's the culture very much very much enjoyed the family atmosphere. Once you get into a relationship with the people who are behind these these firms, these businesses, you really feel a part of it. Like, and you really feel like the efforts to make you feel part of the family, part of the whole mission is very special. I don't think it's something that I've seen anywhere else in the world. Maybe it's just the particularities of the couple of firms I worked with, but they're very good people. So would be very happy and open to looking at opportunities in South Asia, but not today. That we got enough on our plate right now.
Yeah. So tell me about Conversations on Climate. Why did you start it? What led you here, and how's that journey been? Although I think we're twins when it comes to the time that we've had on the podcast, but what's the Conversation on Climate?
Yeah, no, Conversation on Climate. No, it's brilliant. Conversation on Climate is my kind of podcast, video cast, or what do you call them? It's primarily kind of YouTube based conversations on climate. Where I sit down with primarily focus on London Business School people, so current faculty or notable alumni from London Business School, to talk about the energy and climate and the energy transition. Reason I got into it was because, as I mentioned a little earlier on, I was the president of the Alumni Energy Club. And I joined it without really knowing how big it was. And then, I didn't join as president, obviously. But I did, when I got in there, realized that it is the largest industry club on campus. I went, why? It's an energy club. Why is this the largest? Surely private equity, or surely family office, surely something like that should be bigger. So no, then I thought about it and said, well, no, actually energy touches every part of every business. It's a very rare business that doesn't have a component where they really worry about energy, particularly these days, but the cost of energy, how it's going. And then at the end of my kind of term as president, I thought, well, energy is important to the school. There's an awful lot of alumni who are in it. When I go and I have these stuff, because there's a lot of fantastic brains. There's a lot of the world's leading academics, and a lot of the world's leading thinkers and leading leaders are associated with London Business School. So if I can be sitting down with them and having interesting conversations with them, they then kind of feed back their thoughts, their views. And I to be honest, when I started, like the first kind of couple, I was really happy with getting a couple hundred views. Like, a couple hundred views, people were looking. And we had a recent video has had like 72,000 views, and we're now heading up to almost 900,000 total views on YouTube alone. Never mind Spotify or iTunes or any of the other platforms. So people have been really interested in the conversations that these people are sharing with me, and their insights that they're sharing with me. And in going to the leading thinkers in strategy, in economics, in influence, in digital transformation, and talking to them about how their works, their academic work, so their works in their office, how climate's attached to it, how they can help. I think it just gives people a framework of how they can be thinking about climate, and also about leadership and about decision making. Like it's look, for me personally and selfishly, I love it. So you can sit down and you can spend like an hour and a half, 2 hours talking to brilliant people about and asking them questions about whatever you want, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Like you're just picking up just a little fraction of that learning. Wow, and this I'm blessed to do this. But it's also helping other people by people to keep on coming back and they keep on listening, and that is hugely ingratiating as well. I'm sure you got kind of similar experiences where you're talking to all sorts of interesting people.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, if I always think that if I was just like reaching out to someone, even like yourself, and I was just doing like a cold email, and I was just like, Chris, I want to talk to you about something. You might or might not, give me the time. Not just you. I mean, you're a great person that you already gave me the time. But like, if I ask some university professor or a comedian or whatever, they won't just give me their time, because obviously they're busy. But when I invite them to a podcast, it's the response is much just different, and I've been able to connect with so many people that I didn't know I could. And recently I did a podcast with Dr. John DeGarmo. He is basically a foster parenting expert in the US. Yeah, so I never knew about foster parenting because it's not that prevalent in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So just like connecting with you, with other people, it has been it's so brilliant. It's because you get to learn a lot alongside your audience. Like in other YouTube channels, like for example, I was pretty much interested in doing tech reviews and all of that, but MKBHD and all of that. But like, for me, that was like, okay, this is like a dead piece of electronic ware that I'm going to review for. I don't really learn nothing, but in podcast, you learn a lot. And I think it's like, you summed up perfectly that, you get those bits and pieces of information from like really cool people who've, spent their lives doing something. And I think it's just brilliant. I think everyone should do it.
We'll all just end up in a mad virtual everybody podcasting with everybody else, with everybody broadcasting simultaneously. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah. So were you always a conversationalist, or is it something that you sort of picked up while you were podcasting, and how's that experience been like? Any tips for me that you want to give?
I don't know. You do a fantastic job. Always a conversationalist. I always enjoy. I think it's part of being part of the Irish diaspora. We do tend to be talkers. So I've never had a massive problem just chatting to people. I think the biggest tip, something that I've learned going along, is sometimes you need to ask difficult questions, particularly in what I'm doing. You need to, because we're talking about kind of big issues. I'm talking to people who are in like, banks and financial institutions and oil and gas companies or consultants or whatever else, who work with the so-called bad guys. And you could have one approach and say, how can you ever possibly repay the debt that you've been doing? You're hammering the global south with your history. How do you do this? So you have people go, ooh. or you can say, it is great that the oil and gas industry are now taking responsibility. Tell me about what steps your company's doing to be repairing the damage that is done by your predecessors. And people kind of go, okay, an opportunity to talk about positive stuff, but also talking about and making kind of commitments about saying, well, we're doing this, we're doing that. And that's something that's the more they say they're doing this, the more that they say they're doing that, the more likely they are to do it. So there's a certain amount of kind of holding people responsibility. So they say they put it on a record, and then they feel more obliged to be actually doing things. So just it's the way of how to ask difficult questions in ways where you actually get a response.
Yeah, it's quite an art, and I think for me, I like to make my guests feel really comfortable with me first, before I go on to do so many hard questions or whatever. But I try to keep it casual and keep it in a way where, and also I always tell them, if you screw up somewhere, I'm gonna edit, or if I screw up somewhere, I'm gonna edit. So then they're very comfortable. But just getting someone into a room with all those lights and the cameras and everything, it's not a pleasant experience in comparison to if you're having a conversation at a bar or at a restaurant, it's absolutely fine. But it has happened so many times to me that the moment I say that I've stopped recording, the best conversations start happening. So I was thinking maybe to keep the camera rolling and just say stop recording so that I get those calls.
I don't that. So just one more point to make on that. I think most of the time, it's really important to remember we have more in common than we think. Even if you're talking to someone that you think disagrees with you, your assumption is that they disagree with you on everything, and it's going to be fine. But most of the time, even if even let's say I'm talking to someone who's a big believer in fossil fuels, and fossil fuels is the way forward, you talk to them and you understand that they're actually coming from the right place. Like they believe they need to have the lights turned on. They believe that taking people out of poverty is hugely important. There's a lot of things you 100% agree on, and it's only the end part of it, which is how those things are going to be achieved, that you disagree. And that's it. And if you got 80% of you agree on, and the only 20% you disagree on, well, that makes for a much easier conversation. Because you've got so much in common, and just the little sliver at the top. Well, that's the detail. It's important detail, but you've got far more in common than you do against.
So the 2022 Pakistani floods. If you could share your thoughts on that, how was it perceived in the UK, and what do you think has gone wrong, or what should we do?
Yeah, no, that's enormously difficult and heartbreaking series of events. We had now on one side the floods in the normal media didn't get the attention that I believed they deserved. But in all of the medias that care about climate and the newspapers where they think the climate is an issue, it get a lot of coverage. So what do we need to do about it? Well, fundamentally, need to understand that while kind of carbon wasn't 100% responsible for it. Like the developing kind of world of attribution science, where you understand that the more carbon in the atmosphere, the greater the changes in the atmosphere that's caused by carbon. the greater the probabilities of things like that happening are. So you have kind of monsoons that would have been once every 50 or 60 or 70 years, then suddenly becoming once every 3, 4, or 5 years. And same with hurricanes in the Caribbean or in Florida. Like these 50-year events are happening, three or four times a decade, and that is you could draw a straight line between that and the level of carbon in the atmosphere, and the impact that's then having on the on the temperature around the world, and then the impact that then has on weather patterns. So the only way of doing that of trying to reduce that is to be extracting carbon from the atmosphere. To be stopping our addiction on oil and gas. So if Pakistan, to my mind, you should ask. It's actually set up some pretty good policies. It's the kind of 30% of renewables 2030 is ambitious, like from where you are. 30% from hydro is ambitious. 30% of EVs again by 2030. That's ambitious. Now, the execution will be everything, and it's all well and good to be setting policy, but unless you back it up, it'll just go nowhere. It'll wither in the vine. I think there's a little bit of history in that in relation to climate issues and climate policy in Pakistan. But if that's the focus, and you can be moving to 30% along the vertical 2030, that's a really good start. And then you can do another 30% by 2035. And the first 70-80% of changing your energy system is pretty straightforward. Like it's a combination wind, solar, hydro, some batteries, and you're pretty much done. Now, the last 10-20% is really much more difficult. But as humans, we're pretty, and so going back to the point that you're making about people saying that, we can't do this, we don't have enough lithium ion, we don't, we don't have the technology to do it. Well, that's true. We don't. We absolutely don't. We've got the technology to get to 80 or 90% right now. But as humans, we're pretty good at these things. We figure stuff out as we go along. There's no point we can't wait until you've got 100% of the answers. We can be doing 80 or 90% of it and trying to figure out the last 10 or 20% as we go. Because we have to do that. Like for the sake of our planet, of our children, I guess we have to do that. At least in my mind. So with the way I like to think about the energy transition and the energy moving to renewable energy, kind of low carbon features, it's kind of like are you a football fan? You a soccer fan? Yeah. It's like you build a soccer team. So like up front, your center forwards, like your star strikers, are going to be wind and solar. You want to try and get the ball to them as much as you can, and you want them to be scoring the goals for you, and then feeding them your midfield. Well, that's your storage. Those are your batteries. Those are your hydro. That's when, because these guys can't run around all the time. At some point, you need to go. You need to drop the ball, put the ball back to your midfield. Let them pass around a bit. Let these guys get a bit of a break. Get the ball back up to them. They can go and do the sprints again. Yeah. Then going back another level to your defense. Well, at some point, batteries and storage aren't going to solve the problem for you. You need your defense, and your defense as your long term. That's your base load. So that's going to be your biogases. There's going to be maybe nuclear, maybe whatever will just give you really consistent load when the wind's not blowing, sun's not shining, and your storage is not there. Then the last point is your goalkeeper. So if all of that goes wrong, and things will go wrong, your goalkeeper is and we're already probably about 6-0 down in this match. So we need to be trying to catch up on this. And your goalkeeper is your carbon capture and storage. That's what takes the carbon from the atmosphere. And there's the kind of industrial, really expensive factories trying to do it. We'll get better at that. There's things like biochar, and which is Yeah, and natural process of where it's just like charcoal and organic material to capture the carbon that would otherwise go into the atmosphere from the ground. There's lots of things you can be doing to be trying to take carbon from the atmosphere. We need to get better at that for sure. So that's in Pakistan's context. The main first thing to be doing is focusing in on your star strikers. Your wind, your solar, and your hydro, because across the country there's enormous potential for all three of those. Like mountainous regions, where you have very sunny climates, but good winds, good structures. It's a very good country to be building up to building a completely resilient, self-sufficient and renewable energy resource.
So Pakistan only contributes about 2%, or I mean, we're not that industrialized to be creating any impact on climate change, because we don't have that many emissions. So what? So it's basically a world problem. That's why whatever needs to be tackled is never going to come from Pakistan, because we don't create that problem. Do you? What's your thought about fairness when it comes to decarbonization? Because like we need help to tackle all of the world's so essentially the world's industrialization has caused Pakistan to be in this situation in the first place. So what's your thought about that?
I couldn't agree more. It is it's a massive stain on the soul of the northern hemisphere that we've created this problem. We have by taking the resources essentially from the southern hemisphere, and burning them, and you're putting all this carbon into the atmosphere. We have created wealth, and that wealth allows us to protect ourselves against climate change, because we can build walls. We can stop seas coming in on top of us, because we've got the wealth to do it. We've got the wealth to do it because we took all the resources from the global south. It's like it's fundamentally totally unfair. And the global south is paying the price. It's the monsoons that hit Pakistan. It's that is totally unfair. There have been some movements towards trying to pay reparations, like in the last COP20, COP27. There was commitments from the so-called developed nations to be putting cash into help defend against the worst impacts of climate change. But I'm massively skeptical, because this is not the first time that these promises have been made. If you go back to just after the Paris Agreement, there was a promise to put in kind of 100 billion a year by 2020. I think, sorry, my number might be right, but I think it's 100 billion a year by 2020. And up until this point, instead of having 100 billion a year for a number of years, and that build up for a number of years, the total amounts been put in has been 2 billion. So it isn't even 1% of what has been pledged. And if that remains the case from the pledges made last year, well, the pledges will just again, it's execution is everything, and political will is everything. I think your fairness, the energy transition can be a great equalizer in the world. If Pakistan does change its energy system to renewables, it becomes self-sufficient for energy. It no longer needs to worry about importing fossil fuels from neighboring countries. So that cash, that capital can stay within the country, can stay within its own, to benefit its own people, as opposed to going and enriching neighbors, some of which you don't want to enrich.
Yeah, a tough geopolitical situation of Pakistan plays a huge role in how we are. Yeah, because we have some fantastic neighbors, by the way, and for some very odd reason, we're in the thick of everything all the time. So so yeah, I mean, the condition is so depressing when it comes to people who are still reeling from the effects of the floods right now as we speak. The water is still there, even our biggest city, Karachi. But that's partly because of our own fault, like mostly because of our own fault, but it just gets flooded from any rain, essentially. So if there are more rains that we're predicting, so we are expecting a catastrophic situation in Karachi alone, and then 1/3 of the country was underwater in July and August. So and like I don't know how many times we're going to be asking for aid. I think on every year we'll be asking for aid, because there's no way that we have the capacity or the capability or the efficiency to essentially tackle all of this problem.
But I don't even think that framing it as aid is correct. Like it's reparations. It's money. It's money that's your due, that's your owed, and the international community has committed to making this money available. So it's not it's not aid. It's your money, and and so it should be approached in that way. It's not like you're not asking for a handout. You're demanding what's owed to you. It's entirely different. Yeah, and also just one more thing. I read in I think it was in Bloomberg recently. Just speaking of Karachi, that unless things turn around, if things keep on going on the path that they're going, with emissions, with climate, that by 2050 Karachi will be entirely underwater, and that is stunning. That is. You don't even want to consider that. Like it's just that type of
because
world.
That's 30 million people.
Yeah, that type of world is a world you don't want to be living in. That type of world.
Yeah, and same is the case with Florida as well. I think the predictions are same for Florida and Maldives. And
Maldives are in trouble. Maldives are in serious trouble. That's very true. Now Florida, they'll be fine, because Florida I've got all the money to be able to build. They will be fine. There's no way that Mar-a-Lago is going to be washed away. That's. But again, that's the problem with a part of the problem in this part of the world is there's an understanding that with money you can sort out the problem, and if the people sitting there with the money, you kind of go, well, maybe it's not something we need to worry about that much. We can build walls around Florida, will be okay. So people need to have more understand. I think maybe last year might have been a bit of a tipping point in the way that people see the climate crisis, because you had in the UK barometers hit kind of 41 degrees. There was like a massive heat wave. You had massive heat waves in Canada. You had massive heat waves in big parts of the US. You had forest fires in Italy and France, and so suddenly it was hitting it was hitting the global north in a way that it hadn't done before. And I think I think people can kind of brush that off as a once-off, but it'll happen again. It'll keep happening. So quite soon it'll be something that is so embedded in people's minds that they'll go, wow, we actually really need to do something about this for our own self-interest. Never mind, the fairness of it all, but for our own self-interest. And hopefully that'll then kind of prompt a bit more action. But the whole idea of climate being made a political issue, it's just insane. Climate is not a political issue. Climate is a fact. Whether
everything is a political issue,
shouldn't be, but it just shouldn't be. This is something that should be really straightforward. Like we are, our planet is what. Have you ever seen the? Let me just quickly pull this out and show you. Have you ever seen the kind of the trends in atmospheric CO2 versus global temperature change graph? Like it's down there. You seen that?
Oh
yeah. So that's CO2 going up, and that's temperature going up. Like
that temperature.
It's absolutely fine. Like you can't argue with that. This shouldn't be a political thing. Like we put in CO2, temperature gets hotter. Temperature gets hotter. We have problems. Let's do something about it. It's.
And there's also this common misconception of, because you say that we. Even in the Paris Agreement, it was like, we have to bring down the temperature by 1.5 degrees. So since the common person, or even when I heard it for the first time, like, man, 1.5 degrees, what does that even count? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? We'll put on fans or whatever. But what people don't really realize is the fact that that 1.5% global temperature might mean something else to one part of the world, where it might change by 10 degrees. In some parts of the world will be 15 degrees, and that's crazy. I mean, that's like the real, like, places where it was 40 degrees, that was the highest temperature. Imagine 50 or so. I mean, it's just going to destroy the entire the infrastructure, the water supplies, everything. I mean, I even heard in the UK there were some parts of some runway that were melted off because of the heat wave. Yeah, so I think people don't really realize what sort of a big problem it is. And I think it also has like since the most talk about climate change is based on statistics and conversations from scientists and top minds and everything. But I think to have like a mass sort of a appeal to it, it does have a mass appeal to it, but I think we have to really simplify it further so that every common person can also understand what it means for them if we don't act on climate change.
In the context of Pakistan, like food supply is going to be an increasing issue. Like agriculture gets hampered by climate change, and also you've got more glaciers than anywhere else on the planet. They're not. You're right. They're melting, and they're melting really quickly, and that itself causes huge problems. So it's we've got stuff we need to do.
Yeah. Chris, thank you so much. I think I've asked most of my questions. Is there anything that you'd want to add? Anything I've left out? I had a wonderful time.
No, thank you so much. It was really, really, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
And I hope you get called to other podcasts as well. And I hope your first experience being the guest wasn't too bad.
It was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.